You are live on YouTube.
Well, welcome back, committee, to another exciting day of corporations. We were on Senate File 18. I believe you all got the message earlier, but we will only be hearing Senate File 18 today. House Bill 14 apparently ran into some complications on wording between various telecom interests, and they have asked both the majority floor leader, myself, and are convening a group to fix a couple of keywords in that bill to present a united agreement on the bill starting at our committee level. So we're only doing one bill. As you should all remember, we were in the middle of taking public comment on an amendment to the floor. It does look like we've considerably added to our public comment as I'm looking in the waiting room. So let me, I don't see Mr. Andrew, or Representative Andrew. And Danielle, could you give me whatever I call it, administrative privileges?
Yes, will do, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks. So give me just a second, committee. And then we could also bring in, I guess, Representative Sweeney, who's hanging out in there. I'm not sure if he wants in for fun but we'll let him in. So again, we're still on the amendment. Representative Andrew, welcome back. We're in the middle of public comment. Before I take more public comment, did you have anything you wanted to bring up, or you're okay with going down the list? I'm not sure if Representative Andrew can hear me. Representative Sweeney, do you have anything for public comment? We're on the amendment to Senate File 18 right now, if you wanted to jump in.
Mr. Chairman, I was frozen. I'm sorry, I didn't hear anything you said for about 10 seconds.
Oh, no problem. I just said before we continue taking public comment, anything you wanted to kick us off with, or are you okay going into public comment?
Mr. Chairman, would you like me to walk through the amendment at this time?
I think so. Committee, remind me, we did move the amendment and second it. Would that be correct? Okay. So yeah, if you want to walk us through it for about 5 minutes or however long, that would be great.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, the most important point I want to make about this amendment is that it replaces, if you look at the first 5 pages of the original bill, it replaces that language. However, it is a different means to the same end. It does not change what we're trying to accomplish. And the amendment basically takes away the need for the boards to spend countless hours going through the standards of all of our 49 other states and the military branches. And it takes occupational license and treats them more as licenses and allows the board to focus on the scope of the license that the had in the previous state. And the other important part of it is that it requires experience. So what the amendment basically says is that if you worked a job with a very, very similar scope of practice in another state and you were licensed for that job and you have 1 year of experience in that job, then we will issue you a Wyoming license based on that fact. And there's a few more details. If you start with page 1 of the amendment, lines 8 through 13, the definition of, I'm sorry, forgive me, 14 through 16 is the definition of other states. And this definition is important because in this definition, we include military. And that is because various branches of the military issue occupational licenses or certifications for certain occupations, and we want those to be able to be recognized. Lines 31 on page 1 through lines 5 on page 2 require, this is where we require a valid license from the other state with a similar scope of practice.
Okay.
And that was just lines 31 through 35. My notes were slightly off on that. I apologize. Lines 1 through 3 on page 2 is where we require 1 year of experience. 4 through 6 is where we require that the other states properly vetted them. They did have a set of requirements for the applicant. Lines 8 through 9 require that the applicant be in good standing with the other state. Lines 11 through 12 require a clean record. Lines 14 through 16 require that the license in the other state has not been revoked. Lines 18 through 20 require the license has not been suspended in the other state. 22 through 30 require that there are no pending complaints, allegations, or investigations against the applicant. 35 through 40 allow the board to require a jurisprudential exam. And this is where we address the concern of the real estate board because of the different laws between each state. We allow the realtors board to have the applicant take an exam that applies to the laws of Wyoming. Lines 42 through 44 require that the applicant is allowed to get to work in a timely manner. We want this to be a speedy process, like a driver's license. Moving on to page 3, lines 13 through 14. Page 3, sorry. Lines 13 through 14 state that we're not limiting the rights of military members under existing statute. They have some temporary options. This option would work better for them in many situations though. Lines 16 through 17 state that we're not affecting the normal process. Someone starting from the very beginning still has to go through the same process in Wyoming. Let's 14 through 21 say that we are not limiting the state from entering licensing compacts. 23 through 26 state not tying the hands of the agency to recognize other types of licenses as well. 28 through 29 states this law does not affect private certification. 31 through 33 sets an up limit on the application fee because generally this process is going to be less work for the agency to perform than if someone were starting from the very beginning. The emergency power section is a new section. And this basically allows the governor to recognize out-of-state license in a very quick manner in the instance of something like the coronavirus pandemic. And that is the amendment. Thank you.
Okay. Any initial comments from the committee on the amendment? Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Andrew, is this the same amendment, same version that you gave to the Senate committee?
Representative Andrew.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Duncan, this is the same amendment I presented to the Senate committee. The problem I had with that one is I was not able to get it to them to the very last minute, and it is a lengthy amendment.
Any other questions before we take some more public comment? Representative Sweeney, welcome back to corporations. Before I get you there, Representative Sweeney, I did see Representative McGuire had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Who is it that wrote this amendment for you?
Okay, Representative Andrew, I'm not sure if he's asking which attorney drafted it or if it's based on another state or model legislation. If you'd like to take that one.
Mr. Chairman, Representative McGuire, this is based on model legislation from the Institute for Justice that has been used in a few other states as well.
Okay. Sitting back. All right, Representative Sweeney, welcome to corporations, or welcome back. I know you miss us.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions before you get to on the copy of my bill, or the bill I'm reading from, which was the version on the website. And I apologize, I didn't know where to find
The amendment. We're all having that issue today, so and we're kind of technically on the amendment right now, Representative Sweeney.
Yes.
I know you don't have a copy.
So breezing through there, my first question is this bill, because the bill title really doesn't specify that this is only about military spouses. It does say so in the bill title, and my point there is, for a point of clarification in my own mind, is that all we're doing, or are we opening up it to all professions on this universal occupational licensure, or just military families?
Okay, and so Representative Sweeney, as you're not a member of the committee and presenting to us, I'm just taking your questions as rhetorical, just like I would anyone else presenting. But I would hope someone will answer that at the appropriate time.
Okay, and then the next question to the amendment itself. When I look at page 3 of the bill versus the amendment, and scrolling through, as you were scrolling through the amendment, am I correct in assuming that on page of the existing bill, page 3, line 10, the educational equivalency item out of, with the amendment, does the amendment strip out educational equivalency out of language, out of the bill?
Okay. All right, Representative Sweeney, we'll take those points into consideration, and I'll answer them at some point if nobody else in their testimony does, but certainly appreciate you coming today, and always nice to see you on corporations.
Thank you. With
that committee, I'm going to bring a couple people in from the lobby who we haven't heard from yet. Last meeting, Ms. Brower from long-term government affairs person for the CPAs. I think we'll bring her in first. Hopefully she's ready. Ms. Brower, are you there? Perhaps not. Well, let me get a show of hands. If you're in the lobby right now and you wish to testify, if you just raise your hand, then I'll bring you in one by one. Ms. Brower, are you here to listen, or did you want to testify on the amendment or the bill?
At this point, right now, I'd just like to listen until I hear the discussion, but I'd like the opportunity later on, if I could, please.
Okay, got it. Thanks for just pulling you in without your consent. With that, let's start with psychologist, Mr. Hackman. We'll bring Hollis into the room. Good afternoon, Mr. Hackman. Welcome to Corporations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hollis Hackman, Dr. Hollis Hackman, Wyoming Psychological Association. I just have a couple brief comments. I wanted to thank the committee for their work on this bill. We support efforts to make it easier for folks with licenses from other states to get a Wyoming license. So we're generally supportive of the original bill. However, this amendment is causing concern amongst our membership, specifically on the original bill on page 3. There's language in here that indicates that you've got to hold an active occupational or professional license in good standing from another state that mandates substantially equivalent or more stringent educational training, exam, experience requirements, etc. We like that original language. The change of language raises a lot of concern. At least for psychologists, states do vary in terms of what their requirements are for licensure. And we would prefer that if other psychologists are going to come to our state, that they meet the requirements that we have in statute and have had in statute for decades, and not something less than that. So that's basically our position. The one other concern we have has to do with the flat $100 fee for the boards. I'm not sure what other boards charge, but different professions have different requirements for education and things of that nature. So we'd prefer if the boards had latitude to set their fees, as is currently the case, and not just have a flat fee across the board, because there are different things involved with different professions. So, Mr. Chairman, those are essentially our concerns. Again, we're supportive of the original bill, but the language in this amendment is very concerning, and we can't support the bill with that language. And with that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Hackman? Seeing none right now. Hollis, always a pleasure seeing you. Thank you for your testimony. I'll certainly take those into advisement at the proper time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next up, thank you. We'll allow Ms. Gorman, or Ms. Now Nelson. She may have comments on behalf of the CPAs. Hi, Ms. Gorman Nelson. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Members, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Nelson, and I am the Executive Director for the Wyoming Board of Certified Public Accountants. As several of you may remember, I testified back in November regarding this bill. The Board of CPAs had no issues with the current version of the bill, and I appreciate the committee's work on the original bill in the interim. For the benefit of those members that did not hear my original statement, I will give a little bit of background on the Board of CPAs and the statute that governs us. The Board of CPAs statute currently allows for substantial equivalency, practice privileges, and mobility across all 55 jurisdictions. At this time, all 55 jurisdictions have worked over the last 10 years to define and achieve substantial equivalency. In July of 2019, the statute was updated to allow for full firm mobility for CPA firms permitted in their home state. Individual mobility has been in place for some time now. This means that a CPA or a CPA firm licensed in any of the other 54 jurisdictions in the US would be allowed to provide services as a CPA or a CPA firm to Wyoming clients using their CPA license or firm permit in their home state and would not need an individual license in Wyoming. Additionally, any CPA moving to Wyoming or opening an office location in Wyoming is able to do so through reciprocity. What this currently entails is a form, a fee, and verification of their active CPA license or CPA firm permit in good standing from one of the other 54 jurisdictions. This verification is typically done online, and the entire licensing process typically takes 1 to 2 business days to complete. As I stated before, we have no issues with the current version of the bill. However, I have several concerns regarding the amended amendment language. The first concern that I have would be the removal of the substantial equivalence language and the reference to scope of practice. As you may or may not be aware, here in Wyoming, we do not regulate public accountants. In several other states, they do regulate public accountants. So there is a little bit of a difference between a public accountant and a certified public accountant. Because Wyoming does not regulate public accountants, but other states do, they may have a PA license in another state. Could this amendment create an opening for PAs licensed in another jurisdiction to seek a CPA license in Wyoming based on a similar scope of practice, such as doing taxes, without meeting the requirements that the CPAs currently have to meet, which is the CPA exam, the education, and experience. Additionally, as another person testified before, we are a fairly small board. We license approximately 1,000 CPAs, active and inactive, and approximately 300 CPA firms. The amendment that would include only charging $100 for the application, whereas we currently charge $200, while it may not be significant for most boards, that would accumulate to be $3,800 over a biennium. That could ultimately result in the board having to increase their renewal fees for all licensees and could unfairly result with Wyoming original licensees being charged a higher fee than those out-of-state licensees. Nationally, there is something called the Uniform Accountancy Act, the UAA, and this ensures that all CPAs are licensed and regulated equally regardless of where they practice or who employs them. Currently, all 55 jurisdictions are substantially equivalent, like I said before. And should Wyoming adopt legislation, rules, or regulations which alter their licensing requirement in a manner that is not compliant with the UAA, this could jeopardize our substantial equivalency across the nation. This could have a significant impact for the CPAs here in Wyoming and with the CPAs outside of the state. I am concerned this amendment could put our substantial equivalency at risk with the UAA, and the American Institute of CPAs and the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy have not had the opportunity to review this particular language. I am happy to respond to any questions.
Well, we would keep you busy, huh? Any questions for Ms. Gorman-Nelson? Seeing none at this time. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Ms. Nelson. And committee, I was corrected by the good LSO that we are still on basic public comment and have not moved the bill. And so what I'm anticipating is continue in public comment on the bill's merits without the amendment. And when we move the bill, if someone on the committee would like to move the amendment, we can reopen public comment to talk about the amendment at that time. That's the process, and that's probably a more fair way. I was mistaken, the bill has not been moved yet. So for those listening and those on the committee, we are still in basic public comment on the bill. If that means you do want to comment, you can continue to have your hand raised. If you don't have any public comment on anything that's not the amendment on the merits of the bill, you can take your hand down now and I will reopen public comment if the amendment is moved. So with that, let's bring in Ms. Stanfill, I believe from Engineer Surveying. Yep. Welcome, Ms. Stanfill.
Welcome. Can you hear me?
I certainly can. Good to see you.
Excellent. Thank you for the clarification that we are on the original bill. That does help me in my preparations and comments. If the amendment is moved, I may have some further comments. Chairman Zwanitzer and the committee, my name is Shannon Stanfill. I'm the administrator for the Wyoming Board of Professional Engineers and Professional Land Surveyors. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to address the bill and some of the licensure questions that were raised specifically during your February 1st House Corporations Committee meeting. For the record, the board takes no position on the bill. But to begin, I do want to address Representative McGuire's question if this board protects turf. I'm pleased to heartily report that the board does not protect turf, no matter how you look at it. If you view it from the angle of fencing people out of Wyoming, absolutely not. Each application is based on its own merits, the minimum requirements as established by legislation and codified in rule. If you'd like, I can talk later about those minimums and the three-legged stool that underpins that, but let's stay on the turf question. Our statistics illustrate that point the best. 60% of our individuals that are licensed in Wyoming, licensed professional land surveyors in Wyoming, are not residents of Wyoming. 84.4% of the Wyoming licensed professionals are not residents of Wyoming. So there's not a Wyoming related turf question there. But if you view that turf question from a practice angle, again, 2 points there, the answer is no on both. The board recognizes that there are some times when the practice of engineering or the practice of professional land surveying could overlap with other professions that are regulated in Wyoming. And that's why our board, as well as the other boards in Wyoming, we collaborate in those situations. If you view that turf question from a different angle, there is some confusion related to professional practice and education. When a student graduates with an engineering degree, whether that's an engineering accredited degree or a technical degree, they can get good jobs in the engineering field, and they don't need a license. If you have questions about the differences between an engineering accredited degree versus a technical degree, I can again talk about that later, but let's stay on the turf question. These graduates don't need a license, but they may choose to get a license. They can have a nice career without the license. If they choose to get the license, then additional opportunities open up for them, and additional opportunities come with great responsibility. Those licensed professionals stamp and sign and seal projects that last for years, decades even. Those licensed professionals take responsibility. Those licensed professionals take liability. Those licensed professionals take insurable liability. I hope that helps in a small way to show the weight, the yoke that's attached with a professional license. And I hope it also shows an example that there is a difference between a professional license versus an occupational license. So yes, back to the turf, their careers, that those smart engineers that come out of our engineering colleges, they can have a good career. It's up to them how far they want to take it and if they want to pursue a professional license as part of the plan. So I hope that's helped address the turf question. But on Monday, there was also a question related to application denial. So if you want, I'd also like to address that. In the calendar year 2020, there were 520 professional licenses issued by this board. 16 of those applicants were tabled, not denied. There was one that was denied. Now, if the committee wants, I can sure address why we choose to table applications rather than deny. But I respect your time and I want to keep going. There are quick points to the language in the current bill. I want to address a couple of language points: substantial equivalency and the Wyoming law and ethics exams. Substantial equivalency, I reflect on a statement from a good senator who said, "Give the board the ability to do the right thing." The term substantial equivalency gives the boards the ability to do the right thing. If an applicant doesn't qualify under a pathway, then the board looks for other pathways for that license to be issued. And if the board can move an applicant through an expedited pathway, then we do it. 75% of our reciprocity or comity applicants move through that expedited pathway. And that can result in a license in 7 days or less, sometimes as little as 1. But back to that jurisprudence exam. We established earlier that a person doesn't have to live in Wyoming to get a PE or a PLS license, but there is a requirement to take a jurisprudence exam. And when you have 84.4% of your PE licensees that don't reside in Wyoming, it is important to ensure that they not only meet the minimum requirements, but they have a familiarity with Wyoming state law. So I appreciate the proposed bill's language that allows for those exams. And my last point, and I promise it is, this board is accommodating to the military and military spouses. This board does this because it's the right thing to do. And in 2018, this board added a question to our applications so that we could identify those military applicants and their spouses with the intent that this knowledge would help our reviewers recognize those unique circumstances that our military may be facing. From 2018 to date, we have had one reciprocity applicant answer affirmatively to that question. And we moved that application through an expedited path, and that individual received a license within 5 days. And I want to stress they received a full license, not a temporary license, because temporary licenses, they just don't work in respect to what these professionals, professional engineers and professional land surveyors do, because our professional engineers and professional land surveyors, they're working on permanent public projects. They have to take responsibility for permanent public projects. So in closing, the board doesn't protect turf. The board exists to safeguard life, health, and property of the public, and we do so within the parameters of the Practice Act that our good legislators establish. And I want to thank you for helping our military and our military families. And I want to thank you for the foresight in the current bill that keeps those exams, those jurisprudence exams, and for including that term substantial equivalency, because that will help us do the right thing. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee. I stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Stanfield. Any questions from the committee? Not seeing any at this time. Appreciate your time today, and maybe hang out in the waiting room in case the amendment gets moved, and we'll take follow-up questions at that time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. While we're on surveys and engineers, let's bring in Mr. Engels, one of our hardworking engineers in the state. Welcome, Dave, to corporations. Give you a second to get your mic on. Or maybe not.
Can you hear me all right now?
Oh, there it goes.
Okay, thank you very
Yes,
much,
Ken.
Mr. Chairman. Again, I'm Dave Engels, and I'm the current president of the Wyoming section of the American Council of Engineering Companies. ACEC is a national organization that represents engineering firms and land surveying firms that provide private professional engineering. And so we appreciate the opportunity to give comment today, and I'll be brief in that two items that we do have concerns with, and that is the proposed legislation to delete the term substantially equivalent, along the lines of what Shannon was just saying. We do want to make sure that any license that is being afforded to the military or any other person, that there is substantial equivalency in the practice and in the license that they previously received. Secondly, we would ask that the committee consider modifying the length of time for a period not to exceed the time they would get a license. The proposed bill shows extending that to 3 years versus the current language of 120 days. And we think that, quite frankly, 3 years is just too long a period of time. And so we would suggest that as a minimum, that length of time would be no shorter than 180 days or 6 months. So I'm trying to be brief with us, and those are my comments I have today.
All right, thank you, Mr. Engels. I think the wireless in the Capitol just cut out, but I'm back. So committee, any questions for Mr. Engels? Not seeing any. Thank you very much for being here today, Dave.
Thank you.
Yep. And then Mr. Conklin already testified. Let's bring in Ms. Foland. Hi, Cheryl.
Good
Welcome
afternoon.
to Corporations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Cheryl Foland, and I am the legislative advocate for the Wyoming Association of Addictions Professionals. And I'm a licensed clinical social worker in private practice here in Rawlins. And I'm going to follow along with what Dr. Hackman had presented earlier. Our association is in favor of this bill. It will open up many more options for reciprocity for people who want to practice in our great state, who don't have the ability right now to practice without a long course of application requirements that currently are in place. From a personal experience, it took me almost 3 years to get licensed in Wyoming when I obtained my license in 2014. And I had been previously licensed in 2 other states. So just from a personal perspective, I am certainly also in favor of this bill, as are many of my colleagues. But from our association, we definitely appreciate the substantial equivalency component. In the mental health world, we have lots of licenses, lots of credentials, and they mean different things from different states, which is a challenge. The review process that our board, Mr. Searles and the licensing board continue to be very detail oriented in review of education. One of the things that we do find is that if a class that you take in perhaps Colorado is named something different than what is offered here in Wyoming, that can delay licensing, which then delays the amount of services that are provided from our great providers that we have here. Obviously, with COVID-19, we have seen a great need in expanding our labor force. And just a matter of a couple of statistics from the mental health side of things that gives kind of a bigger view. As of the end of November, there were currently 2,214 active credentialed providers identified by the Wyoming Mental Health Licensing Board. Of those 2,214 credentials, 1,706 are currently practicing in Wyoming, and 508 are outside of Wyoming. So as we heard from the CPA representatives and the engineering representatives, we do have a lot of people from outside of Wyoming who do practice. And we want to be able to bring those people into the folds a whole lot easier for those positions that we know we are severely lacking in Wyoming. And with that information, I stand for any questions.
All right, questions for Ms. Foland from the committee? Not seeing any, Ms. Foland, so enjoy the rest of your day in Rawlins. I hear the weather's still good there, and you didn't get the snow the western part of the state got, so hope it doesn't get your way either.
It's here.
Oh, is it now?
It is now.
Try and stay warm. Enjoy your day.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next up will be Mr. Martineau, who I believe is the new Executive Director of the Board of Pharmacy. Welcome, Mr. Martineau, if you can hear me. Give him just a second to log on. There it goes. Hi, Matt. Welcome to Corporations.
How's it going today, Mr. Chairman?
Every day is an adventure in the Wyoming legislature.
Very true, very true. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Matt Martineau. I'm the Executive Director for the Wyoming State Board of Pharmacy. I came in more just in case there were any questions on the existing bill to try to answer any questions the committee members might have, and then I might have more comments if the amendment gets moved. So,
Okay. Any questions from the committee on how this legislation, Senate File 18, affects the Board of Pharmacy? Not seeing any at this time, but hang tight. We might get right back to it.
thank you, sir.
Yep. With that, is there anyone else in the waiting room who would like to talk on the bill as is at this time? Mr. Conklin from the engineers, we're going to bring him back. And I believe everybody else is waiting for the potential if the amendment is brought forward. With that, welcome, Mr. Conklin. I know sometimes it does take up to 20 seconds to get audio and visual connected through.
Unmute.
There you go.
There we
Welcome.
go. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I won't belabor you folks with any more stories. I went through the bill as it is, and based on the discussions that we've had internally and with looking at the licensing status for at least engineers, I have just a couple real minor suggested changes, and I think that would be helpful to at least maybe bring things together for you folks, if that's all right.
Sure.
Okay, so on page 3, under 1A, at the end of that, where it has bachelor's, associate, I believe if it said bachelor's, or associate degree with curriculum deemed substantially equivalent by the Wyoming Licensing Board, that would probably take care of our fears of people coming in from outside or getting a license either under the military temporary license or something else that doesn't have the same academic background that the rest of us practicing in Wyoming are required to have. So that was one suggested change.
Mr. Conklin, if you would just repeat that for me real fast, both for my edification and Ms. Creech, just so I can write it down correctly.
Okay, yes, let me get back to that. Okay, so this is 1A on page 3, starting on line 12. So after the comma after bachelor, it would be or associate degree with curriculum deemed substantially equivalent by the Wyoming Licensing Board.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And then back on page 6, and I assume this would probably go about line 14 where there's that cross out. Under B, it would be II, and that would be meets the requirements established under Wyoming Statute 33-1-120. So basically that's saying if you're going to get a temporary license as a military member, you still have to meet the education requirements. Because there seems to be a little disconnect there because this actually occurs before that, but I might be wrong. That's just the way I interpreted that. And then there were 2 other minor ones, and these might not be big issues for our licensing board. Dave and Dave mentioned at least the 180 days, which I think would be more appropriate. 3 years hardly feels like a temporary license since that's a 10th of a career. And then so on page 7, obviously that would go under 5 there. And then on line 9 on page 7, because our board does table stuff on occasion to allow people who've applied to meet education and experience requirements, it would seem that it would make sense that on line 9 it would say license for which they have applied has been either granted, tabled, or denied.
Okay.
So that's what I have. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present that information. Hopefully that's helpful, and I appreciate all you folks are doing. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Thank you for the specifics. Questions for Mr. Conklin? Not seeing any at this time. Thank you very much. With that, we'll let Colonel Smith back in, or now Mr. Smith. Don't go too far there, Mr. Conklin, just in case we get to those amendments. All right, Mr. Smith, welcome back. If you can, there you go. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Not sure if you can hear me. I don't know if it's my internet or yours that's locking up a little bit. Okay, sir, thank you. In reference to what was just discussed with Mr. Conlon, and I think Mr. Ingalls from the engineering firms mentioned the 180 days. I just wanted to bring the committee's attention, particularly those who weren't in the interim. Down on page 7, lines 6, 7 or so, talking about the 3 years. That was put in specifically to not limit boards, to enable them that have different educational experiential requirements for permanent license that is different than another state. The 3 years was suggested by, I can't remember the boards, but was to give them maximum flexibility. And the key there is it requires the military spouse to make progress towards satisfying the permanent requirement. The idea being that if the board after 180 days, for example, to use the number being thrown about, decided that there wasn't satisfactory progress, they could pull the temporary license. The second thing I wanted to mention that was just mentioned about on line 9, having the license either granted or denied, whichever occurs first. My understanding, and certainly we have a lot of board members who can correct me and explain it better, my understanding is when a license application is tabled, it's often hasn't been done yet. Temporary license for the spouse would continue until essentially a permanent decision was made. Either it's accepted or denied. The problem with tabling the license is it isn't a denial or an acceptance. It's kind of a limbo kind of thing. And if the military spouse, again, going up to line 6, is making satisfactory progress, we didn't want to limit boards to allow them to continue to practice on their temporary license while they fix whatever caused the tabling of the application. And with that, sir, I'll stand for the committee's questions.
Okay, questions from the committee for Mr. Smith? Not seeing any, but I wrote those down. We'll take those under advisement as well, and we'll see if we get those amendments moved as well. And Ms. Peralt, welcome back to Tammy from the DOD.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative Duncan.
Just a clarification. Didn't we already hear from all of these that are testifying? So I'm
We
just
did.
some clarification.
Yep, we did hear from them. I think the last two, one previous time on Monday, but giving them the opportunity since the bill was held over if they had new comments. But I'm sure they'll keep them brief and short. Ms. Peralt, welcome. Any more commentary to add on this bill at the current time?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to speak again, just briefly on this bill. Again, I wanted to just support the comments that Mr. Smith recently gave in that the importance of a 3-year temporary license has to do with the coordination of how long a military spouse would be residing in the state of Wyoming, in that 3 years is a common length of time that a military spouse is assigned to the state of Wyoming. This allows the state of Wyoming to not give a permanent license, but to provide a temporary military license for these spouses. And it also reduces the limitations for the board. We do support the other amendments that were mentioned by the previous speaker, but we don't have any guidance for the amendment, which was has been given by Representative Andrew at this time. I stand by for your questions.
Okay, any questions? Not seeing any. Thank you again, Tammy, for being here. With that committee, I believe that was all the first round of public comment on the bill. So at this point, I would ask what your pleasure is on the bill.
Move the bill.
Moved by Blackburn, seconded by, I saw it from Air first. So we are now on Senate File 18 and open for any discussion or amendments the committee would like to request.
I have an amendment, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Representative Blackburn, go ahead.
Yes, sir, on page 7,
Mhm.
lines 6 through 8 through starting at 3 years, I'd like to strike that down to line 8. Requirements, 2 requirements, including requirements. I would like to add back in 120 days on line 5.
So before I ask for a second, let me make sure you want the stricken language on line 5 back to 120 days and delete the 3 years.
Correct.
That would be your motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Duncan. Discussion from the committee on removing 3 years and going back to 120 days. I'm not seeing any hands from anyone.
Question.
So with that and the question being called, all in favor of the amendment to go back to 120 days, an existing statute, please raise your hand. I have 3, I believe. All those opposed, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That amendment has failed. It's not personal. Are there other amendments, committee, that you'd like to bring? I know the engineers brought in a couple. Their second one, I think, is covered automatically on referencing the 3313-120. The curriculum amendment with the associate's degree being deemed substantially equivalent by the licensing board. I guess I don't feel strongly it's necessary or not necessary because most licensing boards will do what they do, but open up. Representative Duncan.
Thank you. Actually, this was referenced several times during the interim, that the upper part, that the boards and such have their requirements, and it's well covered within their own requirements. So, and then also the part about that they have to follow the particular laws of that particular license, such as realtors, and I think CPAs and such, that they have to pass the local laws or state laws for their licensing. So felt like it was, personally, I feel like it's addressed.
Okay. And then committee, you are all aware there's an amendment from Representative Andrew pending. I know from this morning when I got to work to now, I've got 5 emails questioning different parts of it, and I assume most of you have got those as well. And so certainly open for a motion at this time. If no motion comes, I think the problem overall is that standing committee amendments are not broadcast on the legislative webpage, or there's no easy way to get them to the public. And so if the amendment is not brought forward by one of you, I would certainly encourage Representative Andrew to bring a committee of the whole amendment and get it on the webpage. And the bill, won't be heard until March in the general session. But I would like to make sure the floor is open, Representative Duncan, for any other amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to address that particular amendment, my issue with it is that it was already brought up in the Senate. The Senate rejected it. And my fear is we've worked this bill quite a bit over the interim. Let's see, there was 1, 2, 3 of us, 4 of us that were on the committee. And we went through and heard all the testimony throughout the summer and really worked this bill a lot. And that this never was brought during that time. And so the extensive changes of it, and then the Senate heard it, they rejected it. My fear is that this is a great bill. And once this, if we adopt this and we go through the conference committee, we could really jeopardize the passage of this bill because of not being able to concur between our Senate, counterparts and ourselves. So it really does change. It's extensive. It does change quite a bit of the bill, as we heard a lot of testimony being against this particular amendment. So, I mean, the representative is welcome to do, how a floor amendment. However, I just feel having gone through this throughout your interim, it's not appropriate at this time. I would love for him to bring something maybe as a personal bill to clean up later after we get this in place. But that's just my personal opinion.
And I did talk to several of the senators, and they expressed, I think, a similar concern that the amendment just, when it's not posted and this affects so many licensing groups, there's just trepidation on an interim bill of doing that step. Representative Blackburn, did I see your hand up? I did
Yes.
see it up, whether or not you still want to talk.
Sure, I always like to talk. So, Mr. Chairman, we haven't moved this amendment, so I think we're just skipping along on the ice here. We need to move. Maybe we need to move on.
Okay, I'm certainly trying to be fair to everybody in their viewpoint. Are there any amendments left on Senate File 18 or any further discussion from the committee you would like to have regarding this bill? Representative Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess I would respectfully move the Andrew amendment. I understand some of the points that have been made, but the good representative has brought it before the committee. And I think that having heard as much discussion and testimony as we have on the issue, I think that the committee should discuss it, and if it shoots it down, it shoots it down. But anyway, that being said, Mr. Chairman, I would move Representative Andrews' amendment and apply it to the bill.
Okay, is there a second? Second going once. Second going twice. Not seeing a second, Representative Hunt, but
Okay.
thank you for that motion, and certainly appreciate it. And I'm fairly confident we will see, if not the full amendment, parts of it on the floor. And at least to Representative Andrew, who I know is listening, there are some parts in there I'd be happy to put my name on as well and try to push. So any further discussion or amendments, committee? Not seeing it at this time, and hearing question being called, Ms. Creech, if you would call the roll on Senate File 18.
This is a roll call vote on Senate File 18. Representative Blackburn.
Aye.
Representative Clausen.
Aye.
Representative Clifford.
Aye.
Representative Duncan.
Aye.
Representative Ayer.
Aye.
Representative Hunt.
Aye.
Representative McGuire.
Aye.
Representative Roscoe.
Aye.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Aye. And so committee, oh, thank you. Committee, we're at that friendly point where I'm asking for a floor manager for this bill. And I believe Representative Duncan said only 4 of you were on the interim, but I'm pretty sure all 5 of you were, so I'm not sure who she forgot. But anybody feel excitable about floor managing an interim corporations bill?
Representative Hunt.
Is new to the committee, but how about I will plan on taking it unless somebody emails me to volunteer.
Why doesn't Representative Clausen?
I'll help you out, Mr. Chairman.
All right, how about we'll give it to Representative Blackburn, and
I'm just helping you.
okay, I'll cover it unless anybody else wants it. And
We'll all help our chairman.
okay, I'd appreciate that one. All right, with that committee, again, we're not hearing House Bill 14 today. I am not planning any other committee meetings for the next 2 days or joint meetings with our Senate. I do want to let you all know the word came down from DC that we will not be getting the census data until July 15th. Blows my mind. So what that means for redistricting in this committee is we will be doubling up on our meetings for the fall. So you have some more freedom in the spring, but it'll likely be 2 or 3 meetings, August through December, I'm guessing, for redistricting. So letting you know that now. Representative Blackburn.
Mr. Chairman, I might recommend to the other members, if they're interested at all, that they pull up the minutes from corporations. 2011 was when you guys did the last redistricting, and there's some information in there that you can get. And if there's attachments or things that you can't get from the minutes, I think Matt Obrecht is willing to share some of his points that he took because he was involved.
True. And I know we agreed we were having a meeting in February, but now that notice has come out that census data is not coming until July, I will talk to our Senate counterparts, see if we want to have an intro meeting during February, make it April, but let you know as soon as I hear from Senator Driscoll and Mr. Obrecht about where we're going. With that, committee, that gives you 28 minutes for lunch. Use it wisely. And I will look forward to seeing you at a couple of